My name is Daniel Stalder, bringing you a Week 1 legislative update from the Iowa Capitol. First and foremost, I want to thank ICA members for their grassroots outreach that we saw direct results of in the Iowa Capitol earlier this week. Last week, we put out a call to action targeting specifically the 10 members of Administrative Rules Review Committee who were going to hear a proposed rulemaking by Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and we took issue with two specific portions of that rule. The first was a blanket open records request that OSPs had to comply if a 911 authority asked for information. This sort of blanket open records request is what governments are required to do and should not be subject onto the private sector. After some serious deliberations with Homeland Security, they have agreed to remove this section of code of rules, and we are thrilled about that. The second portion is that the rules more or less ignored the ICA's advocacy over the last year in trying to craft the next generation 911 network in a way that makes sense for our membership. The rule would essentially give blanket authority to the 911 program manager to make points of ingress, and so we are working on language currently which addresses the fact that we have had serious concerns in the past, and we hope that they take those concerns into consideration. As I mentioned, your outreach got to those 10 legislators who then contacted not only us but the Homeland Security and Emergency Management and made sure that our concerns were being addressed. And this sort of conversation would not have happened without your direct advocacy. So thank you very much for doing so. Second, thank you for those members who joined the Welcome Back reception in Des Moines on Tuesday. The first Tuesday of legislative session is always ICA's Welcome Back reception, and if you were not able to make it this year, we hope you'll be able to make it next year. But ICA welcomed more than 100 members into town to make sure that we were able to show strong support and let legislators know that we are here in Des Moines and we are watching what's going on. These are opportunities to build rapport when possible, so that when advocacy is needed, we are in a good place to do so. Now, here in the first week of session, we oftentimes refer to this as syllabus week, but this week has not been the case. There has been a lot of very impactful bills being introduced and even being considered throughout the process. First and foremost, I want to mention that the Senate property tax proposal was released. This is about 2 months earlier than we normally see a property tax proposal coming out of the Senate. We usually see this at March at the earliest, but this more than 100-page document is going to be deliberated and will likely consume a lot of energy throughout the legislative session. There is still a lot to be analyzed and there will certainly be impacts on your business and your property taxes, so stay tuned for more information on the Senate property tax proposal. Additionally, eminent domain was introduced. There has already been a subcommittee and a committee on this topic, and earlier next week we are expecting the Iowa House to vote on this legislation. This will put pressure on the Iowa Senate to consider the topic, and so we will be likely talking about eminent domain for the rest of the session. Now, not every bill is created equally in the eyes of the Iowa Communications Alliance, and while we're going to certainly be talking about eminent domain and property taxes throughout legislative session, there were also several bills that we're going to be filing on and deeply involved. First and foremost is regarding the next generation of 911 funding. Senator Dawson introduced Senate File 2022 earlier this week. This bill was actually drafted and is supported by public safety groups, the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, NENA, which stands for the National Emergency Numbers Associations, and various other public safety groups. The crux of this bill is that it increases the wireless surcharge from $1, where it currently is today, to $1.15, and then creates a 2% annual increase on that fee. This legislation is being supported this bill is being introduced because of legislation that was passed in 2025, which allows Homeland Security to consume local surcharge dollars in order to fund the 911 upgrades. This bill passed in the final minutes of session and really upset a lot of groups that are now supporting Senate File 2022. And so we're going to be watching this bill very closely because it does impact not only the architecture of NG 911, but also how the state plans to pay for it. Another proposal, Senate Study Bill 3008, would force the consolidation of joint 911 service boards and local emergency management commissions. This is actually an idea that's asked around a lot of why do we have these overlapping but sometimes not concentric regulations of emergency communications and emergency response. I would mention that this bill was not drafted in concert with the local groups that it does affect, and so this is potentially going to be a point of conflict for a couple of different groups in the Capitol. We're going to be registered undecided on both of these legislations, but obviously with chance for amendment, it's very possible that we see an opportunity to advance community-based broadband providers, or that somebody else sees an opportunity to hurt community-based broadband providers. So we're going to be following these bills very, very closely. We are going to be bringing you weekly updates every Friday from the Iowa Capitol, so we hope that you'll tune along. As always, if you have any questions, we encourage you to reach out. I'm available by email, I'm available by cell phone, and your engagement does matter in this process, so we hope you'll reach out. Thank you very much.